Hey everybody, I'm Chris Massey, and welcome to the Chris Massey Music Show here on the American Hearts Radio Network. We're coming to you live tonight from our studio here in downtown Atlanta, and tonight is episode 3 of season 4 and the 53rd episode of the Chris Massey Music Show. We are glad you are tuning in. And as always, I'm joined by my partner in crime, Mr. Al Burrows. Al, how are you this evening?
Bang, bang. Where's the gun?
Well, and I got some very sad news that Al will be leaving the network after next month's show. So we're going to have Al come and sit down and talk with me a little bit on the next show.
I want my cupcakes.
Yep, yeah. Sorry to hear that Al is going to be leaving, but he has got some bigger and better opportunities, and we're very happy for him. Although we are going to miss him. All right, so let's see what's going on. Okay, March the 4th, Donald Trump tweeted that he just found out. Now, not he suspects. Or not someone said, not that he might have heard, but he said he found out, which sounds to me like evidence, right?
It sounds like evidence.
That Barack Obama had wiretapped his phones or whatever over at Trump Tower. Now, as of today, what's today, March 20th?
Yes.
As of March 20th today, there are only 3 people in the whole universe that believe this is true. Donald Trump, Kellyanne Conway, and Sean Spicer. But here's the deal. Sean Spicer and Kelly Conway, they don't really believe it's true, but Donald Trump tells them that they got to believe it's true. So they're forced to go on TV and lie about it. You know, this guy is unbelievable. You know, he can just make up anything he wants. You know, he reminds me of that guy in high school that wants to go out with a cheerleader, and she's dating a football player. So he goes out and spreads a vicious rumor about this football player all over the school, so she'll break up with him, and then he asks her out. That's Donald Trump. That is Donald Trump in a nutshell. So I don't know what's going to become of it. I mean, it is just absolutely ridiculous. It really is. Now, today, we found out that there is actually an investigation into whether Russia was trying to mess with our last election. Now, Sean Hannity, who has just gone off the deep end since Donald Trump has become president. And you basically got 3 talking heads for Donald Trump. You got Sean Spicer, you got Kellyanne Conway, and you got Sean Hannity. And it doesn't matter what this guy does, they're going to back him up. You know, well, they are 100% anyway. Well, he kept saying today on his show that there is no evidence that Russia had anything to do with the outcome of the election. Okay, that's what he keeps saying. Now, for all you Republicans out there that think that Donald Trump just walked away with this election, let me remind you, there were 5 key swing states that he won. He won all 5 of these states by a combined vote total of 100,000 votes.
Get out of here. 5
states. Minnesota, Wisconsin, Florida, Virginia, and North Carolina. All 5. 100,000 votes. No, Pennsylvania was one instead of someone. He won Pennsylvania by 20,000 votes. Okay? And then he lost popular vote by 3 million. So it was not a runaway. It was not a runaway at all. But the thing is that's only one part of the investigation, as if they had anything to do with the outcome of the election. The other part is, were they trying to, and did people in the Trump campaign know about it, and were they working with them? That's the one. You know, nobody thinks really that they had anything to do with the votes, but were they trying to? And did the Trump people know about it? Now today, Donald Trump's approval rating came out, and he came in at a whopping 37%. 37%. Let me tell you what happens when you're president of the United States and you only get a 37% approval rating. That means that about 17% of the people that voted for you wish they wouldn't have. That's right. That is right. At this point in Barack Obama's presidency, after he took over a country that was in the worst shape it had been in since 1932, when Franklin Delano Roosevelt took over after Herbert Hoover, and if you're wondering, Herbert Hoover was a Republican, just like George W. Bush. Barack Obama's approval rating on this date was 62%. 25 points higher than Donald Trump. Now, they say that the economy, you know, overrides approval ratings. I mean, let's just take a look. The unemployment number came out in February at 4.9%. Now, the Republicans have still not adjusted that to 12%, like they claimed the whole time during the election, which makes me believe that it never was 12%. They just lied about it. So the unemployment rate is at 4.9%, and the stock market is at a record high. And the president has a 37% approval rating. That is hard to do. That is hard to do. That's like being a baseball team and being in first place by 25 games, and the majority of the people in your city think you suck. I mean, that is really, really difficult, but this guy somehow is pulling it off. If anything, he is entertaining. I will give you I will give you that. Now, Al, did you see Donald Trump's budget the other night?
I can't take it.
Did you see his budget? Okay?
I've heard about it.
Now, Donald Trump is doing things like he is doing away with the National Endowment for the Arts.
Among other things.
Yes. Now, this makes perfect sense because most conservative people don't know anything about the arts. And they don't care about the arts. All they like to do is complain that people that create great art are liberal and won't keep their mouth shut. Okay? So that's not surprising at all. He's also doing away with the program Meals on Wheels. Now, my grandmother was a recipient of Meals on Wheels when she lived with my mother probably the last 8 years of her life. Now, here's the thing. American taxpayers right now are spending $183 million to keep Donald Trump's wife in that tower over there in New York with her son. Okay? Now, Donald, if you could just get her to come to the White House and sleep in the same bed with you, we would be able to afford Meals on Wheels and the National Endowment for the Arts and all the other services that you're cutting out for middle class and poor people in this country. Okay? I mean, I don't understand why people don't get it. This guy don't give a rat's ass about the working man. His tax cut, over half of that money is going to people making over $1 million a year. Over half. What is it, a $2 trillion? $2 trillion tax cut? To people making over $1 million. So all you middle-class Republicans, when you get your check from Donald Trump for $550, you just run right out into your cul-de-sac, start jumping up and down and saying he's the greatest president we've ever had since Ronald Reagan. And don't spend all that money in one place. How about that?
Don't forget Mar-a-Lago.
All right. Okay, tonight we do not have a guest. We're going to be doing a tribute to Chuck Berry, who passed away this Saturday at the age of 90. Got some good information on him, so stick around. We'll be right back. Hey, I'm Leon Smoker.
And I'm Rachel Jordan.
And I'm Moses Moe from Mother's Finest.
And you're watching the Chris Massey Music Show.
Hey, man, you remember that time when you guys opened for Aerosmith?
I do. Man, that was awesome.
Boys got the drinks going round. I ain't got no worries and the work's all done, and I ain't going home. I'm having too much fun.
All right, we're back. So, this past Saturday, one of the greats rock and rollers of all time, Chuck Berry, died at the age of 90. 90 years old, Chuck Berry was. Now, that is the oldest any rock and roller has gotten to. I did some research, and Fats Domino is 89 years old. Little Richard is 84. Jerry Lee Lewis is 81. Chubby Checker is at 80. And Bob Dylan is 75 years old. Did you know that?
Yeah, 35 years.
75. So Fats Domino has a chance to pass Chuck. But something must have been in the water with these guys in the 50s, man. They've all seemed to live a
having too much fun.
Yeah, that's right. They've all seemed to live a long time. Now let me put that into perspective about Chuck Berry for you. A lot of people don't realize this, but when you really break it down, now he was born in 1926. Okay, so if Chuck Berry's father, let's say, was 31 when he was born, that would have made Chuck Berry's dad born in 1895. Now, if Chuck Berry's grandfather was 30 years older than his dad, that would have meant that he would have been born in 1865, which would have meant Chuck Berry's grandfather was born a slave. How about that?
Wow.
How about that?
Wow.
Grandfather born a slave, and his grandson grew up to be one of the most influential, not just influential African American, but influential American musician in pop culture, period, in the whole 20th century. And when he passed away, Chuck Berry had a net worth of $19 million.
Wow.
$19 million. How about that? Now, the thing that has always amazed me about Chuck Berry is he was not a kid when he started recording in the 1950s. He was playing in some clubs in St. Louis with his piano buddy Jimmy Johnson. And they ventured their way to Chicago, where he met his idol at that time, Muddy Waters. And Muddy Waters directed him to Leonard Chess, who owned Chess Records. And it was there that he went in and redid a country song into Maybelline. And that was Chuck's first hit. That was Chuck's hit. Right there. In fact, Chuck Berry, I believe, was 29 years old. Now, here's something that a lot of people don't know. When they did the recording of Chuck Berry, his voice was too deep. So, he played the songs slower. They speeded up the recording to make his voice higher.
Did not know that.
How about that?
Wow.
How about that? And now the thing that it's amazing, though, is that you've got a 29-year-old African-American man. And let's face it, by the time Chuck Berry got there, Chuck got arrested for armed robbery when he was 14. Spent some time in reformatory school, and he got in some more trouble, too. I don't know if we're going to get into that or not. But how this 29-year-old African-American could tap in to what high school life was all about for white suburban kids. And he did it with a simple formula: girls, dancing, and automobiles. Those are the three things that all guys had on their mind in the 1950s. Was girls, dancing, and what kind of car you were driving. In the song School Days, he describes a school day in America perfectly. He starts off within the morning, up in the morning and out to school. Then he gets to lunchtime. Ring, ring goes the bell. The cook in the lunchroom's ready to sell. You're lucky if you can find a seat, fortunate if you have time to eat. If you've ever been in a high school cafeteria, you know exactly what he's talking about. And then at the end of the day, he talks about going down the hall, out the street, down to the juke joint, sticking a quarter in the jukebox, and dancing. This was going on in small towns across this nation everywhere. Everywhere. Sweet Little 16 was a #1 hit 2 times. Did you know that? I didn't know that. The first time it was a #1 hit for Chuck Berry. The second time it was a #1 hit for the Beach Boys when they called it Surfin' USA. And Chuck Berry sued the Beach Boys and got all of the royalties for Surfin' USA. It's the same song. It's the same tempo. It's the same melody. It has the same break. Because they'll be rocking in Boston, inside, outside, USA. I mean, it's the same. The same tune. Now, the Beach Boys had to know it when they put it out. I mean, ain't no way you're going to convince me that Brian Wilson, being the genius he is, did not know when they were writing Surfin' USA that it was the same song as Sweet Little 16. But it put the Beach Boys on the map, and it made Chuck some more money. So anyway, but the main thing that he did, because in the 1950s, you had Elvis Presley, there was Jerry Lee Lewis, there was Fats Domino, there was Buddy Holly, there was Chuck Berry, there were groups like the Platters and the Drifters. But what Chuck Berry did was he set a precedent in rock and roll, and that is this, is that the star of any rock and roll song is the electric guitar. Is the electric guitar. Now, before Chuck Berry came along, the electric guitar had basically been used as a rhythm instrument. in all of your big bands, they all had guitar players, but the horns were doing all the leads, and the piano was doing all the leads. In country music, it was the steel guitar, and it was the fiddle. Nobody was doing any picking on a guitar, you know. And even on Elvis Presley's first hit, Heartbreak Avenue, there's a little bit of guitar on it, you know. But not like what Chuck was doing, you know. He made it very evident right from the first lick of Johnny B. Good. You know, and I knew the song Johnny B. Good when I was a kid. And I knew Chuck Berry did it. And I would say that any music fan, even the most uninformed music fan, if you ask them, do you know the song Johnny B. Good and do you know who did it, I would guess that just about everybody knows what that song is. The influences he had on other bands are unbelievable. You know, Keith Richards was probably of the Rolling Stones, was influenced by Chuck Berry probably more than anybody. You know, the Beatles were influenced by him as well, but the Beatles were more influenced by Buddy Holly and the Everly Brothers. You know, they got the harmonies from the Everly Brothers. Buddy Holly and the Crickets. Do you know that is the first rock band to have two guitars? Buddy Holly was very, very innovative in his time, and the Beatles followed that blueprint right with that. But the Stones were more into the blues, you know, and they liked Howlin' Wolf and some other groups, Muddy Waters. They did some of his songs, but Chuck Berry was certainly one that they dug on, you know. And it doesn't stop there. Every band from the British invasion, you take the Who, the Stones, the Kinks, the Animals, Jerry and the Pacemakers, all influenced by Chuck Berry. And then you get into the late '60s, Jimi Hendrix, Eric Clapton, Jimmy Page, Jeff Beck, even up to Stevie Ray Vaughan. I mean, these people were all influenced by what Chuck Berry did on the guitar, and Chuck Berry had nobody to model that style after, you know. He came up with it on his own. Now, another thing that's a little interesting is, and I've heard rumors about this, is that Chuck Berry played songs in a lot of weird keys. B flat and C, and these are typically piano keys. So a lot of people think that his longtime piano player, Jimmy Johnson, was contributing more to the sound than he was getting credit for, but he did get his credit due. You know, and on Chuck's 60th birthday, Keith Richards put together the Hail Hail Rock and Roll movie, where Keith gave something that Chuck really had never had. He gave him a dynamite band. Did you ever see that movie? It's his 60th birthday. It's in St. Louis, and it's got Keith Richards and Robert Cray and Eric Clapton and just a host of five-star musicians on stage with Chuck, and Chuck does his whole repertoire, and it's really good. You know, because Chuck was, you know, that $19 million really doesn't surprise me, because Chuck was quite a shrewd businessman. You know, he basically, when he got out of, he went to prison in 1960 for violating the Mann Act, and I'm not going to tell you what that is. You can look it up, okay? But he was in prison, and he got out in 1964, and he had a couple of minor hits with No Particular Place to Go and a song called Nadine. Now, one of the things about Chuck's songwriting is, and that a lot of people have emulated over the years, was his attention to detail. I mean, he didn't leave, you know, like in the song Memphis, you know that song, Memphis, Tennessee? Last time I saw Marie, she was waving me goodbye with hurry home drops on her cheeks that trickled from her eye. Now, have you ever heard anybody say she had hurry home drops on her cheeks? And the song Nadine, and I heard Bruce Springsteen say this. The lyric in that song is, I saw her around the corner as she stopped and doubled back and started walking toward a coffee-colored Cadillac. Bruce Springsteen said, I've never seen a coffee-colored Cadillac, but I know exactly what one would look like. And that was the brilliance of Chuck Berry. But when he got out, you know, he had those couple of minor hits in 1964. Then the British invasion happened, and Chuck Berry decided then that he was going to spend the rest of his career being Chuck Berry. You know, like Elvis decided he was going to be Elvis. And all those guys, you know. Buddy Holly is the one that I think that if he would have lived would have progressed with the music. I think in 1969, Buddy Holly would have had hair down to here, and he would have been playing hard rock music. I think he was that progressive of a musician. But these guys found a way to make the money, and that's what they went with. And, you know, Chuck decided early on that he was not going to waste money with a tour bus and a touring band. And what Chuck Berry did was he went on the road. He called the promoter. He said, you get me a bass player, a drummer, and a piano player. Have them there. Give them a copy of Chuck Berry's greatest hits, and I'll see them at soundcheck. He traveled in a Cadillac with his girlfriend, a guitar, a gun, a carton of Cools, and when the show was over, he had to be paid in cash. And I know that for a fact because I know the guy that used to manage the Agora Ballroom. And that caught up with him because in 1979, he did a little time for tax evasion, you know, to be paid in cash. Now, I will tell you that a friend of the show, in 2003, Chuck Berry came to Chastain Park, and the promoter got a band together, and the gentleman he got to play drums that night was the one and only Daryl Rhodes. Yes, there's a picture of Daryl he put on Facebook yesterday of him at the show in 2003, and Daryl played drums for Chuck Berry. And Daryl told a really good story, and I know he won't mind me telling this, but Daryl went up to him, and he did not say, you know, when he met Chuck Berry, you know, and he got this from somebody who gave him the skinny. He did not say that it is an honor to play with you, because nobody was worthy of playing with Chuck Berry. What he said to him that night was, it is an honor to be working with you. Let Chuck Berry know that he is the boss, and he called the shots, and that's the way it went. Bruce Springsteen, when he was a young musician, backed up Chuck Berry. A lot of other people did. Now, and as you can guess, a lot of these shows were not great. Because in some of these towns, the musicians that they got were not good. They were not well rehearsed, you know. But eventually, but that was not the deal. You weren't there to see the band. You were there to see Chuck do the duck walk, and every film clip I've ever seen of him, he always looked like that he was having a good time, you know. And it's sad that all these rock and rollers are going now, you know. But you know, just the influence that he had on rock music as we know it today. And I'm going to close with this, and a lot of people don't realize this, but, you know, Chuck and Elvis and Buddy Holly have more to do with the Beatles' success than a lot of people realize. And here's why. In 1958 or 1959, Buddy Holly was killed in a plane crash. In 1960, Elvis went into the Army. And in 1960, Chuck Berry was arrested for violating the Mann Act. So you had three major rock and rollers taken right out of the scene. So during this time, from 1960 to 1964, the record companies decided that what they were going to do was they were going to market rock and roll, and they were going to tame it. And their whole deal was they thought was that if they could get the parents to approve of it, that it would sell more. So they came up with acts like Pat Boone, Bobby Vincent, Fabian, Leslie Gore. And any music rock critic will tell you that from 1960 to 1963, those are the worst years for rock music. It was horrible. It was horrible. They didn't realize, somehow, they didn't get the memo that in the 1950s, that the reason these kids liked Elvis, Chuck Berry, and Buddy Holly was because the parents hated it. You know, and they thought if they could get the parents to like it, that it would be good. Well, what they did was they set themselves up for four long-haired guys from Liverpool, England, to come over here. And there ain't no way they was going to make it where the parents were going to like him. And the kids went bonkers. Bonkers. If Buddy Holly doesn't die, if Elvis doesn't go in the Army, Chuck Berry isn't out of the music scene for 3 years, that music from 1960 to 1963 would have been different. And the Beatles, sure, they would have had an impact, but it would have been such an impact as it was. Just something to think about. But anyway, Chuck Berry was one of the greats. I mean, you know, you're talking top 5. He was in the very first Rock and Roll Hall of Fame class in 1986, along with Elvis and Buddy Holly, and Keith Richard inducted him into the Hall of Fame. So anyway, you talk about somebody who will be talked about hundreds of years from now. If we're still around, still listening to music, and I imagine we will, Chuck Berry will be one of them. We'll be right back. Hi, everybody. I'm Rick Renfro. Say you're having a little trouble getting going in the morning. By the afternoon time, you feel like you need a nap. That morning and afternoon cup of coffee just isn't doing it anymore for you. Well, it's time you try Coffee Crank. That's right, Coffee Crank. We take the finest coffee beans from Colombia and mix it with methamphetamine made in someone's basement right here in the good old U.S. of A. Coffee Crank goes down smooth. It's very effective. Hey, man, it's like rocket fuel. But don't take my word for it. Listen to Betty Johnson, a Coffee Crank drinker.
Hi, I'm Betty Johnson. Before I started drinking Coffee Crank, I was the worst employee at work. I was out of shape and so tired when I got home I never wanted to have sex with my husband. He wanted a divorce. But now, after only drinking Coffee Crank for 1 week, I'm the most productive worker in the history of the company. Going to the gym every day is a snap, and every night I come home and bang my husband till he passes out. Coffee Crank has changed my life.
Wow, Betty, that's really impressive. How about some Coffee Crank right now?
Don't mind if I do. You can feel it working instantly.
Now, what about those times you say when you want a great tasting cup of coffee but you don't want to get wound up? Then you need to try Coffee Crank Decaf. We take away the caffeine and the amphetamine and mix in high-grade quality heroin. Just 1 cup of Coffee Crank Decaf and you're going to be feeling mellow-jelly and too smooth to move. But what about those times when you don't know which way you want to go? Try this. Pour yourself a half a cup of Coffee Crank and mix in a half a cup of Coffee Crank Decaf. What have you got? It's the Coffee Crank Speedball. That's right. It'll get you going till you find out where it is that you need to be. Coffee Crank, available at your local grocery store. Get some today and crank it up with Coffee Crank. All right, we're back. You just saw a clip of me playing Rick Renfro and Rachel Jordan as Betty Johnson. Rachel is up in Minnesota, doing very well, and she'll be coming home in July. I hope to get her on the show, but I don't know if we're going to have enough time because she is going to be enrolling in Columbia University, New York City, to go to graduate school. We are very happy for her here at American Hearts Radio, and I'm sure she is going to do wonders up there. We just hope that the recruiters do not find that video of Coffee Crank before she gets up there. It may hinder her chance to get admitted into that school. No, I'm just kidding. I'm sure they'll love it. All right, so in July, the great rock band from the early 1970s in Atlanta, Hydra, that was on Capricorn Records and toured with people like the Allman Brothers and Leonard Skinner, that Rhett Willie had write-ups in Rolling Stone magazine. They're going to be having a reunion show at the Vista Room on the Vista Road in Atlanta, and we hope to have here 2 members from Hydra next month. One of them being Spencer Kilpatrick, who was the great guitar player for Hydra, and Spencer also played in a band called the Atlanta Vibrations. And they opened for the Beatles at Atlanta Fulton County Stadium in 1965. So how about that? How about that? Also, Al, did you know that Colonel Bruce Hampton is going to be having his 70th birthday party at the Fox Theater? No, man. All kinds of celebrities. Billy Bob Thornton's going to be there. What's Butch Trucks' son's name? Derek Trucks, he's going to be there. People from REM. I mean, just everybody. Now, let me tell you, there are a lot of big acts in Atlanta from Atlanta, but Colonel Bruce just showed everybody who's their daddy. Because nobody is having a party at the Fox Theater, holds 4,000 people, and having all these people in. I'm going to try to make the show. I'm sure it's going to be great. So wherever you are out there, Colonel, happy 70th to you tonight. All right, so we'll be back here next month for my last show with Mr. Al Burrows, so be sure to tune in. And like I always say, always love your woman. Take life as it comes, and when you get the chance, have too much fun. We'll see you next time.